There's no doubting it, I love One Piece. It's my favourite manga and it's definitely one of the greatest anime of all time. But that doesn't mean I think the series is perfect, or that I start glazing Oda, calling him names like Goda, or like all these other things that the One Piece fans just love to do in the community. But ever since the time skip happened in One Piece, I've noticed a slight dip in quality from the pre-time skip era of One Piece. I'm not saying that One Piece falls off or that the post-time skip of One Piece is bad. I actually think that the post-time skip is fantastic actually, and still does a lot of the same things I like from pre-time skip, like the emotional moments, the comedy, expanding the lore, and the world building of the series. I just want to point out my reasons for why I prefer the pre-time skip One Piece over the post-time skip. I haven't read the Elbaf arc yet, I've only read up to the end of Egghead, but I still think my reasons will remain valid, because even if you exclude Elbaf, the number of chapters that span from the return of Sabaody all the way to the end of Egghead is 528 chapters, and that is almost half the amount of chapters that One Piece currently has, so I think that's enough content to be compared to the pre-time skip of One Piece. So the first thing I want to talk about is the way Oda uses his characters, particularly the Straw Hats. I feel like in the pre-time skip, most of the members had a lot to do in the story besides Brooks since he joined very late, but characters like Robin, Nami, Chopper, Frankie and Usopp, they had way more moments and fights in the pre-time skip compared to now. With Nami, when she was first introduced, she has some mystery to her because of her hatred towards the pirates, despite forming an alliance with Luffy and Zoro in Orangetown, but then betraying them in Baratie. Then in Along Park, that's when we finally see her backstory and why she was doing the things what she was doing throughout the East Blue Saga. Her finally asking Luffy for help instead of trying to do everything herself is definitely her greatest character moment, and even after all that, she still has great moments. She has a fight against Miss Doublefinger from Alabasta, she has a fight against Caliber from CP9, and she was even willing to spend all the life savings of the crew to buy Kami at the auction despite her being obsessed with money. But when we go to post-time skip, she hasn't had as much moments. She only has one fight against Ulti, which wasn't really a one-on-one fight since majority of the time Nami and Usopp were just running away from them until Big Mom comes in and interferes, and then she just one-shots her after reuniting with Zeus.
What? What the fuck?
The fight itself wasn't really as interesting or strategic like her other fights from the pre-time skip, when it would involve her using her knowledge of the weather with the climate attacks to beat her opponents. The best moment I can give her is her forgiving Jinbei for setting Arlong free, which was at the start of the time skip, but in Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Zoe, most of Whole Cake, or Egghead, she doesn't really develop or do anything that's significant to the plot. With Chopper, in the pre-time skip, he fought against Wapolo and his men, Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas with Usopp in Alabasta, he fought one of the 4 priests of Skypiea, Kumadori from CB9, and he fought against Dr. Hogback and his zombies with Robin in Thriller Bark. But the only fight in the post-time skip that he's had was against Dawson from Fishman Island. Even if we compare the character moments of Chopper, he has had way more emotional moments in pre-time skip, like during his backstory with Dr. Hiruluk and when he leaves Drum Island and sees the cherry blossoms. In Thriller Bark, him finding out that Dr. Hogback, one of his idols, was the one that was gathering the corpses to create them as zombies, was a great moment because Dr. Hogback was a doctor who Chopper really respected, and for him to find out that the type of person Hogback really is, it really affected him as a fellow doctor. This moment is quite similar to Punk Hazard, when Chopper finds out that Caesar Clown was the one using the kids as experiments, but it doesn't really hit the same because Caesar Clown wasn't anyone Chopper knew about, nor was he someone he idolized, so it felt tame compared to what happened in Thriller Bark. Also, I personally don't like how Chopper essentially became like a mascot in the post-time skip. Back then, the monster point was terrifying, and it was something that carried a great risk, which was why Chopper giving into his inner monster to fight Kumadori to save Robin was such a great moment for him. But now, there is not much risk to using the monster point anymore, and the form really hasn't done anything that significant throughout the post-time skip, besides beating Dawson from the Fishman Pirates. With Usopp, he's had many great moments in pre-time skip, but I can't say the same for the post-time skip. Usopp had moments in Along Park, Thriller Bark, which included his best fight in the entire series against Perona, and he has a good fight against Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas, with Chopper during Alabasta. In Water 7, we really see his inferiority complex start to show more after losing the money to the Franco family, which is part of why he left the crew, and his fight against Luffy was a really emotional moment in that arc. But when we go to the post-time skip, he doesn't really have that much moments, or he doesn't really develop much at all. I would say Dressrosa was where he had his time to shine, but in the other arcs he doesn't do as much. Even in Dressrosa, I don't like how he abandoned Robin at the factory, running away from Treble and Sugar. Yeah, he came back, but I feel like at this point in the series, he shouldn't be this cowardly still. In Along Park, the same thing happened when he was running away from Chew, but that was at the beginning of the series, so I wasn't really bothered about it. So I don't like how he got repeated again hundreds of chapters later. And throughout the Wano arc, which is the longest arc in One Piece, Usopp literally does nothing significant, or doesn't have any fights, which is what he always had in the pre-time skip. Robin also doesn't do as much either. She was great as an antagonist as Miss All Sunday when she was first introduced in the Alabasta saga. She was also very important in the Skypiea arc as well, because of her knowledge of the poneglyphs, and she also had a fight against Yama, who was part of Eno's army. She was also very important in Thriller Bark when her and Frankie tried to find a way to save the rest of the crew. Her best moment in the entire series was her saying that she wants to live in Enies Lobby when you finally get her backstory as well. But in the post-time skip, the only useful things that she does was protecting Rebecca from Diamante and beating Black Maria and Wano. You could say she's still important in reading the poneglyphs, but she's always done this since she joined the crew, so it's nothing new. Now this one isn't this much of a deal, but I also feel that Sanji's characterization was a bit shaky at the start of the time skip. The jokes about him seeing women for the first time in 2 years was funny at first, but then it got old real quick during Fishman Island during the serious moments. I also didn't like his suggestion to Jinbei to own alive himself as a way to atone for how long tormenting Nami's life, even though Nami didn't need him to talk for her, since he has nothing to do with him. But I'm glad that as soon as we got to Punk Hazard, he was more in character, and he still continued to do cool things every arc since then. So even though Zoro, Sanji and Luffy still do a lot in the post-time skip, most of the other Straw Hats don't really do as much as they did back then. Still on the topic of characters, the post-time skip introduced us to so many new characters, but only a few of them were actually memorable and served the plot. When we look at the 9 Scabbards of Wano, I feel like they could have been written better, because I didn't really care much about them whenever they appeared besides Kinemon. Same thing with the Straw Hat fleet from Dressrosa. Bartolomeo and Cavendish, they were the most memorable ones, not only because they did more during the birdcage situation, but they just had a lot more personality than the other fighters from the Colosseum. In Punk Hazard, I also couldn't care less about the kids from the experiments, or Brownbeard and his crew. But when we go to the pre-time skip, less characters were introduced whenever they went to a new island. Vivi was way more memorable because of her chemistry with the crewmates. She was useful in Drum Island and even talks to Luffy about how to be a better captain. We also see her struggles in saving her country from Crocodile, and that she suddenly tried to do things herself and instead let her new friends help her out. And this was during her little fight against Luffy, which was a really impactful moment. Vivi really felt like part of the crew, and most fans can agree that she really could have been a permanent member. But I can't really say the same thing for Kinemon or Carrot, who have been part of the crew way longer than she did. Carrot lacked depth and just didn't add anything substantial to the crew when she joined them temporarily. All she did was look up to Chopper as like a big brother, and held back Daifuku's fleet with her Sulong form. But in Wano, the only thing that she does is fight against Perospero, and she loses to him. Avenging Pedro would have been great for her character, but instead she loses and she needed Nekomamushi to save her. And after all that, she is now the next leader of the Minks, despite not really doing much.
See, now that's some bullshit.
Law was easily the best supporting character in the post-time skip, because he had made a massive impact on the plot, he had a brilliant flashback with Rocinante, and just played his role perfectly as a supporting character to the Straw Hats, making him a huge fan favourite. The supporting characters introduced in the pre-time skip like Paul Lee, the Frankie family, Dorian Broggy, Wiper, Ivankov and Bunkley, they were way more memorable and served more to the plot in each of their respective arcs than the majority of the supporting characters shown in the post-time skip. If we compare scenes like the CP9 reveal plot twist to the Kanjuro reveal plot twist in Wano, the CP9 one felt way more impactful to me, and this was because this led to CP9 becoming one of the biggest villains in One Piece, with them being huge challenges for the Straw Hats. But with Kanjuro, he wasn't really threatening to begin with, or he wasn't really anyone of great significance, because Kaido, Big Mom and the Toby Ropo, they were all way stronger than him and they were way more threatening on screen. Another character introduction I felt wasn't executed as well as the pre-time skip was Sabo. I do like Sabo as a character, and it seems that Oda wanted to bring him back as the next big brother role for Luffy to replace Ace. I personally feel like Sabo should have stayed dead, because what made Ace's death more impactful was the fact that Ace was the only brother Luffy had left, which is why when Jinbei said to think about what he has left, it was great for Luffy's character to realize that he's not alone. So bringing back Sabo kind of lessens the impact of that scene, since now we know that Sabo was alive all this time.
Not a great plan.
And to explain his absence, Oda decided to give him amnesia. And another problem that I have with Sabo being alive all this time is the fact that he was the chief of staff of the revolutionaries, meaning that he's second in command after Dragon. Ace has sailed in the New World as part of the Whitebeard Pirates, but he never once heard of him, despite Sabo being Dragon's right-hand man. Sabo was confirmed to have a bounty of 602 million, which is a high bounty, even higher than what Ace's was, which was at 550 million. So I personally feel that it didn't really make much sense that they never heard of each other. So it feels like Oda never planned to bring Sabo back, and was initially meant to be a character who died in Luffy's backstory, like how all the other Straw Hats lost someone important to them in their own backstories. I don't think Sabo is a bad character at all, I just didn't like the fact that he was brought back, since it lessens the impact of Ace's death, and doesn't make much sense given how high he is in the hierarchy of the revolutionaries, and that Ace never once heard of him. Another reason why I preferred the pre-time skip over the post-time skip is how the power system was used. In the pre-time skip, Devil Fruit was the main power system, and it was a very good one at that. It's one of the most creative power systems in Battle Shonen, which made its fights more interesting. Each Devil Fruit was unique to one character, they all had the same weakness to water, and they were divided into 3 categories: Logia, Paramecia and Zoan. In post-time skip, Devil Fruits are still being used a lot, but now the introduction of Haki is where the problems start to come about. Because Haki is now being used way more often as the series goes on, it starts to take away the creativity that the fights initially had back when it was just about Devil Fruit. This is because one of Haki's properties is that it can nullify Devil Fruit powers, especially Logias. Back then, Logias were very broken, but Oda still gave those powers weaknesses. With Crocodile, water was his main weakness, which is why Luffy had a fighting chance against him, and later on at the end of the fight, after running out of water, Luffy instead used his own blood to harm Crocodile because blood also contains water, and this made the fight more strategic and creative. In Skypiea, Enel's weakness was rubber, and it made sense why he was seen as a god because the Sky Islands didn't have rubber as a resource. But if you add Haki to the situation, it just nullifies the ability completely, taking away any potential strategy or any counters for that specific Devil Fruit, and it just simplifies the fight as a result. The fights still look good, especially in the anime version, ever since Wano got adapted, but I still preferred when it was just double for abilities going against each other and trying to find creative ways in beating your opponents. Conqueror's Haki only being accessible for a few characters from birth and not from training also causes the problem of sidelining any characters who don't have Haki even further, since they would never be able to keep up with those with Conqueror's Haki. The pacing is another problem I have with the post-time skip of One Piece. I'm not just talking about the anime version. I think that the anime is way worse with the pacing, but even in the manga, I feel like the arcs are a lot more drawn out and are longer than they needed to be. This is mainly due to the number of long arcs and sagas that are in the post-time skip. In the pre-time skip, we had 4 different sagas which each consisted of multiple shorter arcs. These were East Blue, which contained 6 short arcs, Alabaster, which contained 5 arcs, Skypiea, which contained 2 arcs, Water 7, which contained 4 arcs, Thriller Bark, which was a solo arc, and Summit War, which contained 5 arcs. That comes to a total of 23 arcs, which is a lot, but only 5 of those 23 arcs were over 40 chapters long. Most of them were short and quick to read through, so despite there being so many arcs in the pre-time skip, you might think that One Piece might be too long, but if you read them through, you'll realize that most of them are not long arcs and they are arcs that can just be read in a day probably. But when you go over to the post-time skip, there are 4 sagas as well. You have the Fisherman Island Saga, which consists of 2 arcs, Dress Wizard Saga, which has 2, the 4 Emperor Saga, which has 4 arcs, and the Final Saga, which currently has 2. That is a total of 10 arcs, which is less than half the amount in the pre-time skip, but 6 of them are over 40 chapters long. And the Elbaf arc still hasn't ended yet, and there's still more arcs to come in the Final Saga. And out of those 10 arcs, 2 of them are over 100 chapters long, with the one arc being the longest arc in the entire series with 149 chapters. And this is partly due to too many characters being introduced and getting focus on them, which increases the length of those arcs significantly. But most of the supporting characters aren't even that interesting to begin with, and they waste more time was spent on the Straw Hats instead. Just the one arc alone is longer than every saga in the pre-time skip, and it's all taking place on one island the entire time. At least with the other sagas, there were multiple short arcs taking place on different islands with different villains to face, but we were in Wano for that many chapters and only a few chapters focused on what was going on outside of Wano. Another reason why this is a problem is because the whole Kaido plotline literally began in Punk Hazard, and we were introduced to Kinemon and Momonosuke. It started in Punk Hazard, then they had to go to Dressrosa to destroy the factory to stop the production of the Smile Fruits. Zoro was where we learned more about the Kozuki clan, and the alliance between the ninjas, minks, samurai and the pirates was formed. Whole Cake Island and Reverie, they had nothing much to do with Kaido, but Whole Cake Island was still building up towards Wano because Big Man was the secondary antagonist of Wano, and Sanji's character developed more during his fight against Queen, because of what happened at Whole Cake with him in the raid suit. So from Punk Hazard to Wano, which was 404 chapters, it was all building up to beating Kaido, but in pre-time skip, all the sagas had their own major villains to face, so we didn't feel like that we were on one plotline for too long. The East Blue saga was building up towards taking down Arlong, ever since we were introduced to Nami. The Alabaster saga was about taking down Crocodile. The Skypiea saga led to taking out Enel, and the Water 7 saga was about saving Robin and beating CP9, who were going undercover as shipwrights. So with these sagas in the pre-time skip, they always led to a big bad type of villain at the end of each saga, so it felt fresh and new every time this happened. But in post-time skip, most sagas were a part of the process in taking down one villain, which I personally felt took way too much time. And honestly, I was glad that we were done with Wano because of how much time that we spent with it. So the final thing that I want to talk about is the art, and I'm specifically talking about the manga. The art in the pre-time skip is still good. Oda can still draw some really great panels even after 20 years of writing the manga, but generally speaking, I think there has been a decline in the quality of the paneling as the series has went on. I felt that the art was a lot cleaner during the pre-time skip, and the paneling during the fight scenes were easier to follow and more pleasing to read, but nowadays, the panels feel a lot more clustered with so much more speech bubbles in the panels, making it more of a chore to get through when it never used to be like this. This could be due to Oda writing and drawing manga weekly for over 2 decades consistently, so it was eventually going to take a toll on him, which is why he has been taking more breaks more often. And again, there are times where the art still looks really good, like for example, that panel of the 5 elders in their Zoan forms. That's one of my favourite panels in the entire manga. I'm just saying that in a general sense, the art and the paneling has had a dip in quality as the series went on. So my reasons for preferring the pre-time skip era of One Piece over the current post-time skip were that the Straw Hats were utilised better, the supporting characters were better and served the plot more, the pacing of the arcs were better, and the arts looked more appealing. I'm not saying that post-time skip is bad. I still think it's actually really good, and I do plan on making a video about the things that the post-time skip actually did better than the pre-time skip, because there definitely are things in the post-time skip that's improved upon the pre-time skip.